So we wanted to bring you some information just to help kind of keep things in perspective as you consume, well, maybe you don't consume some of what is out there in the news media, but this is a keep things in perspective kind of a poll. Let's throw these results up there on the screen. Our friend Ryan Gordusky flagged this on Twitter. So in the new Suffolk University poll, they asked Trump supporters their opinion of QAnon. A grand total of 4% had a favorable view, 31% had an unfavorable view. The largest proportion here actually had never heard of QAnon, and then 21% are undecided. And this is like a warning and also a danger in a lot of ways. It's a warning of the news media loves talking about QAnon and Marjorie Taylor Greene and all of these things.
Party of Q.
Party of Q, that's the Democratic Party's intentions for messaging in this next midterms, tying Republicans to QAnon. And so just keep in mind, that's not to say that, you know, the explosion of conspiracy theories in the country isn't something to keep your eye on, but we're talking about 4% of Trump supporters that have an affirmatively favorable view of this. So keep perspective on the size and breadth of this phenomenon. But number two is, look, if there's one thing we know from observing politics all the time, the minute that you turn something into this like central political culture war issue, guess what happens? You're going to raise that number from 4% to a lot higher if Democrats truly go all in on Republicans are QAnon.
Exactly. And that is exactly the point that we should be making, which is that when you make something a culture war issue and you have the CNN and the New York Times and the MSNBCs who are like Republicans are the party of Q, a lot of Republicans will effectively be like, fine, I'm with Q. And they'll even defend it. I mean, that's basically what Trump did, right?
Yeah.
And the reason why is because they cannot give any ground whatsoever mentally to these people. And it will turn itself into one where you will have people who actually don't agree with QAnon at all or don't even believe in QAnon be like, no, I will defend it, which then allows that to flourish, which disallows any real introspection. And at the end of the day, 4% of the people have said that they're for this thing, man. Like, come on. Does that merit? I mean, just think about what this 4% support. Yes, it manifested itself in terrible ways, in some ways, on January 6th with the Capitol riots, right?
Yeah.
But are we really going to pretend it was all QAnon? No, there were some people there who were QAnon. Some people there just loved Trump. Some people there were crazy. That's just how it works. And this is the part that we need to understand is this 4% of Trump supporters has now ignited a domestic political witch hunt, the likes we have literally never seen. We have a permanent troop deployment, essentially, in Washington, D.C. for no reason, because of these 4%. Mm-hmm. We have over $500 million known dollars spent on that deployment. At the same time, you have hundreds of millions of dollars worth of airtime on MSNBC and CNN dedicated to talking about a domestic insurgency and the need for a new domestic terror law. I saw an article in The Root, and look, I know it's The Root, and it's like, you know, the critical race theory, blah, blah, blah. But this is a place where they're writing an article saying, if these people were in Iraq, we would have hit them. They're talking about them as if they would have been killed by the U.S. military, with a drone strike. They're like, we would have slaughtered them. Like, just outright insanity, which is being printed right there. I mean, this is a mainstream center-left view amongst a lot of people in the establishment. They may not say it so crassly.
That might be actually true, but not something to be celebrated or embraced. Like that's the thing is when people, and this type of discourse has become really mainstream of, we need to treat them the way we treated insurgents in Afghanistan and Iraq.
How did that work out?
Right. We need to have a new 9/11 commission. All of these things, it's like, did you think that this went well, the whole war on terror? Like, did you think that we did a good job executing this, didn't have blowback and wasn't an utter disaster that completely destabilized an entire region, not to mention incredible, outrageous violations of law and surveillance techniques, especially against Muslims here in the U.S.? Like, did you think that stuff was good? Because especially if you're even remotely on the left or center-left side of the spectrum, I suspect that you were probably very opposed to many of those things when they were actually being propagated in the war on terror. So it is this bizarre way of thinking, but this is the way that politicians and that national security state apparatchiks gain increased power for themselves. You scare the shit out of the population. You say there's this menace, there's this threat. It's in your neighborhood. It's online. It's everywhere. And the fact that there were the riots at the Capitol gives, of course, a justified manifestation of that danger. And then you use that to justify all sorts of power grabs that are, yes, going to increase surveillance here domestically, that, yes, are going to just continue to beef up and bolster the national security state here. And once people get power, they don't like to relinquish it. So it's both a media story, it's a Democratic Party story of, look, you turn QAnon into a culture war issue, you're only going to bolster its popularity, make it more prevalent at a time when, frankly, it looked like it was on the wane. Because the whole thing was around Trump's going to get a second term and he's going to have the storm and people are going to be arrested. That didn't happen. So people were naturally, it looked like, starting to move away from the theory. And Democrats and the media, by fixating on this, are just going to pump it back up. No,
exactly right. And I really think we should think about the amount of public discourse this has ignited. New York Times calling for a literal reality czar in order to destroy misinformation online.
God,
Twitter and Facebook banning these things outright, saying that they are linked to violence. In some cases, that is true. But how much violence? Is it actually worth empowering companies and setting forth the gateways? I'm going to talk a little bit about that, I think, tomorrow. And the more that we see about how this tiny phenomenon has ignited now something of a complete domestic political freakout, we must, I think, resist it at all costs.
Agreed.
Yeah. All right, coming up, Obama and Bruce Springsteen are launching a podcast together. We're going to discuss the details when Rising returns.